here's your stuff. Okay, we're going to move right along. When you go into planning this conference and the panels that you put together, it's very difficult to keep them at a size that's manageable and get the conversation going in an hour or an hour and a half, depending on how long we give the panel. So we're not able to just put everybody that we would like on every single panel. So we try and do a nice cross-section and hope that we can get the message out, and certainly that's where we're going with this panel. Before I bring the panelists out, I would like to introduce my co-moderator, Mr. Steve Wallace, who works at Miami Center, FAC rep for many years. Yes. He also was an interspace communications instructor and a regional coordinator for collaboration. With that, I'm going to bring the panelists up, starting with the Great Lakes Regional Vice President, Mr. Bryan Zilonis. Terry Biggio, Air Traffic Services Operations. Toby Hauck, FAC rep at Chicago Center.
Go Toby.
And Bill Cound, ATM at Chicago Center. Matt Walters, FAC rep at South Bend. Mike Thompson, FAC rep at Minneapolis Center. And Ron Sekenski, staffing manager at Minneapolis Center. And thank you all. With that, I'm going to say a couple things, and then we're going to play a video and get right into it. You know, aviation professionals are the best and always will be the best contingency plans. As Gordon Graham said this morning, and would categorize what took place this day in September as very high risk and low frequency. And it's a good thing it's low frequency, but it was that kind of event. It's a good thing that we had quality people in place with a healthy respect for risk. They demonstrated at the very highest levels of professionalism and teamwork and collaboration during that outage and immediately as it started.
Absolutely amazing. Gentlemen, I gotta say thank you. The utmost professionalism the entire time. And for those of you that saw this is the first time that these folks have seen it up here. That just sends chills up your spine. It's one of those moments in your career that you hope you would never see, but you train for it. And I gotta tell you, the professionalism displayed in the continuous operation is fantastic. So thank you. We'll start the questioning. I want to get the discussion rolling, and I want to pose a question to Toby and let him start this off. So the FAA is comprised of many big moving parts. And on September 26, 2014, we lost one of those big parts. What did that feel like? What was it like at that moment? And what did you do immediately after the event and the alarms went off?
The morning of September 26th, I got a phone call, 5:30ish in the morning from my PFR, ERAM PFR lead, and he said, hey, we evacuated the building, we got a fire. The first thing I thought of, we got another fire alarm, this will be over in a couple seconds, whatever, I mean, it's just the norm. We have fire alarms all the time. And then I got a call from one of my younger reps, Blake Hughes, who played a major role in this a little later on. He said, something's going on. You got to get in here. Something's going on. So I live about an hour from the facility, and got up and I told my wife, Darla, I said, I'm going to work, and drove into the facility. I said, I don't know what's going on. I'll let you know. And got to the facility, and Bill and the rest of the facility had already evacuated outside of the facility. I could walk you through that day. Listening to this brings back a lot of emotion, a lot of pride for what the people in the building did. And we'll touch on what the people did outside of the building, the pride of the event as we go through it. But that's a good friend of mine there at the end of the, I recognize every one of those voices. All of those guys are good friends of mine. They take a lot of pride in their job. You talk about professionalism. They show it at the scope every single day. But as the day kind of progressed that day, Bill and I stood outside at a picnic table and used our cell phones and iPads and hotspots and whatever else we could grab a hold of. We were out of the building. We started making a decision on when to let the 5 o'clocks go, the 5:30s to go, the 6 o'clocks, what we were going to do with the mid-shifters, how we were going to transition into the swing shift. We still didn't have any real idea of how long or what we were looking at. There's a barrage of people coming in onto the grounds at this time, and you're talking FBI, DEA, a whole bunch of different people that aren't usually in our facility. Yes, and you go through a kind of event like this, and I mean, you get wrapped up into it, and you're in the game, and everybody's playing. You're on one team, and you've focused on one thing, and I don't know. It was probably 9:30 in the morning, and I was standing out with, at that time, the executive officer was Dave Scafidi, and we've watched all these vehicles go in and out, and here comes a police car, says Aurora Cadets on the bottom of it. I look at Scuff, and I said, well, we've got them all here now. So the cadets made it. But after, it was probably about 10:30, Mike Paulson, the tech ops manager, comes up, and they want to search the building, and they got 5 bomb-sniffing dogs. The only people left on the grounds are Bill and I, a couple managers, and some tech ops folks, and not a whole lot of those. And Mike come up and said, I don't know that if I have enough people that know the building good enough. I need a volunteer to go in with a dog and walk the floor. So I said, I'll go in. And I can't explain. I can explain to you what I saw. I can't explain to you what I felt. To walk in on a control room floor, a place that I walk every day, 3, 4, 5, 10, 12 times a day, visit with people, talk to people, hear people's concerns, to go in and it's empty. And there's data blocks still on the scopes. And it's the lights are still down. It's eerie, and the dog's sniffing for another device, and it's very eerie. We come out of there, and my timeline's probably not super accurate because the days and weeks just kind of melt together there for a while. But by 12:30, 1 o'clock, we were allowed to get back into the building. We started in a conference room with us and tech ops, and Telcon's rolling, and it was quick to know that very soon we were going to have to split the 2 tech ops away from air traffic because they had things they needed to do and we had things we needed to do. And Bill and I sat at a table together the entire time, and this is what the plan is. This is where we're going to go. This is what we're thinking, and we're trying to get a grasp of what's going on. We don't know what the other traffic is out there. We have no idea what airplanes are going in and out of Chicago at this time. Tech Ops brought up a display. I don't remember if it was that day or maybe even Saturday, and we could start to see airplanes feed in and out of O'Hare. And, that's an amazing sight when you talk about a big part of the facility, not of the system, a big part being gone. And I don't know, was it 4:30, 5 o'clock that evening? Bill and I were asked if we wanted to go down and see the damage. And, it's a crime scene. So you can't just go down there and touch things and look at things. And we put on our little bio booties and our little gloves, and I don't remember if we had hats or not, but we walked down the steps, and it's a crazy sight. The smell, the sight of biohazard and things on the floor, and we went back and looked at the damage, which is Tech Ops didn't really, they had a grasp by then what we were kind of dealing with, and there's a lot of feelings that go into that, a lot of things that you just don't, the what if, where we go, what do we do now, and so when you ask about a big part of the puzzle being gone or a big piece being gone, it was gone, and we got to see it face to face, and it was pretty powerful.
So, I'll pose a question to Ron and Mike and Matt. So you get a phone call, you get a landline call, there's been a problem, we've lost Chicago Center. Where did you go next? What was the next step?
So for me, my day kind of started like Toby's. I was at home. I got a text. Usually something bad happens. You know, you get the text. And it said Chicago's ATC 0. I didn't think too much about it. You know, being in TMU, we get those, you know, facilities go ATC 0. And you're thinking, it's be a couple hours. It'll be okay. They'll get it fixed. They always do. And, you know, we'll be fine. Never bothered to look at the news. Came in, and every day we have an 8:30. And there was kind of some talk about it at the 8:30 with the managers and some of the other people, and that's when I realized the extent and how bad it was, and you know your heart just sinks because you're thinking, you know, no Chicago Center. I mean, it was, you know, it's probably better that I didn't know because I'd have probably been a wreck driving in, you know, thinking about what my next plan was. So really, at that point, I hadn't pre-planned on anything until, you know, now your mind starts going. And we really didn't know what we were going to do until after that meeting. We had heard that the Central Service had called the Telcon, and we were going to all get together and start trying to come up with, you know, what can we do to help get planes running back into O'Hare, in and out of O'Hare again.
So Matt, people started showing up at your facility not too long after that. What was that like?
It was a godsend. I don't know any other way to put it. We needed help, and we needed help bad. And they gave us 4 really, really good people that wanted to help and went way beyond anything they could have possibly been asked. You know, we had 2 home football games, which is South Bend's busy about 5 Saturdays a year, and 2 of them happened to be during this event. And when the city ran out of hotel rooms, I came in what would have been an opener shift, but since we'd been running 24 hours, I came in at 5 o'clock in the morning to Mark Sullivan walking out of my union office after having slept on the couch because he couldn't get a hotel room. I mean, we've been talking about professionalism this whole time. Epitome of professionalism right there. He said, you know, he could have used sick leave and gone home. He could have drove back to Illinois and been at home, but he said, no, you know, these guys need my help. If I have to sleep on a cheap futon, I'm going to sleep on a cheap futon. And that amazed me because I like to think that I would do the same thing, but I don't know.
Ron?
So I kind of feel like Mike did. You know, we thought it was going to be, you know, we'd find out that it would be a 30-minute outage and we'd be able to deal with quick recovery and we'd be out of the woods. And the first time I realized that we weren't dealing with a normal experience with an ATC 0 for a short period of time was when we were all on a telcon together with our director, Kim, out in the audience and trying to get Bill and Toby to give us a clue of what the time frame was, and they mentioned to us that we can't even get down there because it's a crime scene. And at that point, we realized that this wasn't going to be anything out of the ordinary. You know, we were gonna have to come together and figure out collectively how to manage our way through this, and you know. Through the leadership that we see sitting up here and on the telcons and all the people, I know in Minneapolis Center and everybody else, the surrounding facilities, the amount of people that just had this overwhelming desire to step into the fray and to help out and help recovery, it was palpable how everybody wanted to just help out and help through this.
Bryan and Terry, Biggio, both of you, you're at a, you're not at the facility level, but certainly you were engaged immediately from different perspectives. How do you, when you know this is happening and you know it's significant, how do you step back a bit and let them, those closest to the operation, do the work they need to do to get the system as close back to capacity as we can, as soon as we can?
Bryan. Initially, it's difficult. It's my facility. I come from Chicago Center. As often as I am, I was on the road when it happened, and I was on my way to Indianapolis Airport to head to Minnesota. And when Toby initially called, we didn't know how serious the situation was. I just felt from the tone of his voice that this wasn't going to be something fast. So I began the process of driving, working my way back, just trying to figure out what support I could provide for them. And once along that drive, we realized the level of devastation and the amount of work that was going to be needed to be put into putting things back together. I was only going to be a distraction. Coming from Chicago Center, having been a former FAC rep, if I walk into the building, it's going to be perceived that I'm there to take over. And that's not what Toby needed. Toby needed me to step aside. We really set up a text process where he texted me when he needed something. I called him. I made sure that I coordinated with anybody he needed to coordinate with. He only needed to speak with me. So that was the setup that Toby and I had agreed to make sure that they could get done what they needed to do. And Terry, amazingly, within 30 minutes of things, immediately on the text messages, what do I need to do? Is there anything you need? It was very well set up, and really by design, we stayed out of the way just so it didn't look like we were coming in to take over.
Yeah, and I think we learn over time as to what's appropriate. As I hearken back to Dr. Fallon's presentation as an ESTJ, to answer your question directly, it is really, really hard to not want to get in and to help. Right? Knowing that we look back at Asiana 214, you look back at 9/11, being in different roles at different points in time, especially on 9/11 where people were trying to help us, but realizing that it was just, they were too much of an interference as we're trying to run the operation, knowing that Bill and Toby got it. We have to convey the information, we have to get Administrator Huerta information, NATCA leadership as well as our COO, Terry Bristol, and just trust and empower, the facility to make the decisions. Because as you'll hear, as you go on, I think everybody in this room realizes that if you're to take out all the automation, right, and all the communication in between, from a controller perspective, this is almost one of the most unbelievable events of all time that we've ever experienced. And the teams that are partially represented up here did an unbelievable job. Paul mentioned earlier, by day 4, Chicago was back to number 4 in the country, and they sustained that for the entire time. You can't plan for that.
Right. 11 of the 17 days, Chicago O'Hare was number one. Busiest airport. Bill, you've been in the agency for a while, such as like I have, so nothing there. And so you've seen different levels of collaboration. I'm sure you've seen different levels, different kinds of relationship with the workforce from the management perspective, and certainly we have seen it from the union side as well. Had this occurred at a time when we hadn't put so much focus and so many resources and so much communication into the importance of collaboration and working together, how would it have looked had it been under, a previous time when we weren't even talking to each other?
I think that it went much better as a result of that. I think to some of the training and things like IBC that we've done in the past, and I actually had an opportunity to talk with some of the IBC people about this. We didn't use the process, but you know what? They're not training us in that process to use it. They're training it to institutionalize the idea of working together in collaboration, and I think that's what we saw. 1 week after the fire, the administrator came out to the facility to visit. And on his way out the door, he said, it's kind of interesting, but I cannot tell who is management and who is union. I cannot tell who is tech ops and who is air traffic. It is one team with one goal. And that's what I felt. I do take a little exception to the one goal. I actually think we had 2 goals. Initially, it was resumption of services. How do we provide a level of service to the flying public? And then the second goal, after a very short time, was how do we restore the system? But all along the way, we had people working together at a level that I have never experienced. Teamwork, cooperation, collaboration, people coming to the table with solutions at hand, no turf protection, no selfishness about which facility is going to do what. It was truly people both at an operational level sitting on a position working together, and at our level working together. A little frustrating for Toby and I, the people in Chicago, to some extent, because remember, for 17 days, no one in Chicago Center worked an airplane. So we were trying to influence the system really from outside to a great degree. I don't know that we were successful in that, but you all were. The story is about all the facilities coming together, about those 15 approach control facilities that took on a role, working traffic they were never trained to do, that they had never worked before, all the centers reaching out and finding creative, innovative ways to work traffic. You all, people sitting in this room and your peers, are the people who made that happen, and I want to take the opportunity to say congratulations and thank you. You are the ones who made this work. We talk about professionalism. If I had put a definition to it, I think I saw it over those 2 weeks. I would define it as taking people who are well-trained and have well-honed skills, the critical core elements that the speaker this morning was talking, and apply them to a situation that they have never seen before. That's what we saw, and it was really an amazing thing to be part of that. So congratulations.
You mentioned an interesting point, especially from the approach controls. We have a staffing concern in a lot of our facilities. We had a hiring freeze, and we're about 1,000 CPC short of where we were just a year and a half ago. So that's there. They don't all work 24/7 operations. They're not used to planes that are going as fast as they were going at altitudes that they'd never worked before. So from your perspective, and certainly from South Bend, did we do the right thing by sending them help? Did we do the right thing by expediting the recovery of Chicago Center? I know there was some discussion about, could it really be done in 17 days? Should it have been moved to the tech center, and how long would that have taken? So anybody that would like to answer that, specifically South Bend.
Yeah, I think it was a very good thing to send them to help us, because, I mean, I can't speak for everyone. At South Bend, we are an overflight facility. I mean, our airport, we're so close to Chicago that it's easier to drive to Chicago and fly than it is to fly to South Bend. So our radar, we do that already to an extent. I mean, nowhere near where we were when the center was out, but we were sort of set up to do it already, not to do it 24 hours a day, and not necessarily at the level that we did, but I mean, we did. But the thing that I really liked about it was not only did they send us the people from the center, but nothing was off the table. No plan was going to nobody was going to say no to anything anyone suggested. And what was sort of a funny thing was we had a gentleman that had just transferred out and was still current. But he'd been gone for 3 weeks, and much to his chagrin, I'm sure, but he came back, and they gave him a quick over-the-shoulder, and boom, we had a midnight shift guy, just like that. So yeah, I think it absolutely was the right thing to do, and I really appreciate how the agency and the union worked together, and just nothing was out of bounds. I mean, just give an idea and run with it, and let us do what we do and keep it running.
You know, Trish, there were so many unsung heroes that day. You know, you look at places like Moline, I think they had 6 or 7 CPCs, and all of a sudden, poof, within hours, they're a 24-hour facility. You know, anyone that's done schedules, you can do the math and figure out that's not going to work. Right? You look at Matt's facility, Matt, what, 300% to 400% is what your traffic went up, but also did so many other approach controls. You know, we put some stress on the system, you know, to allow the user community to continue to fly. But as everyone has said, it's the people in this room and the people on that webcast that went to Herculean efforts to keep the system running, and nobody said no. I mean, when you looked at bumping the approach controls up to 15,000, it wasn't in our plan, right? But we did. The team did. You know, and you look at all the other procedures that were put in place. I was able to go after about 2 weeks to a bunch of the different. I went to Rockford, Muskegon, Milwaukee, and South Bend before I went to visit James at C90 and Dan at Chicago. And it was just incredible to watch. Every position filled. You couldn't tell who was center. You couldn't tell who was terminal, except in the tower, in regards to who's given those clearances. But I will say that it was just unbelievable. If you could ever, I would love to see a case study done to memorialize what all the teams did that particular day, because it was just off the chart.
Go ahead, Toby.
I'd just like to add to that when that first come out that we were going to send out people to different facilities, Bill and I sat down real quick and we said, look, we got to figure out who and how we're going to send people to different facilities. And so Chicago Center, just like a lot of other big facilities, we get a lot of ERRs, especially from the approach controls that are underneath us. And one of the first things that we talked about, qualifications. How are we going to get people to these facilities, right? We've got a contract article that kind of covers it. So what are we going to do? We're going to find people that were previously certified in those facilities, and we're going to ask them if they wanted to go. You got to remember, we had about, give or take, 200, maybe a little 215, 220-ish people volunteer to go to another facility. They volunteered. Nobody was ordered. Everybody went to another facility and worked whatever hours they had to work, stayed wherever they had to stay. We didn't have travel government credit cards for them. We didn't have any paperwork for them. They just drove. We had people that left our facility 3 hours later, called back and said, hey, can you give me the address of where I'm going? I'm going, but I know I'm pointed the right direction. Give me the address. So, I mean, people just got in their cars and left. And I've said this a couple times. I said it when the secretary came out. To me, that's patriotic, right? The system could have failed. The country could have failed. Imagine a downspin at 17 days without Chicago O'Hare running airplanes. Imagine what that does, right? Instead, this little group of folks that work airplanes in this country, 14,100 and managers that are all involved in tech ops folks, and I don't know, what is there, 20,000 in the agency? I don't know that number, but it's like a little army, and they put this country back on the wheels, and they did it. The thing is amazing to me. 4 days afterwards, we're back to number one. O'Hare's back to number one. I talked to James and Dan. We talked all the time, and it's just it's amazing the amount of stuff that happened, and the people side of it it's patriotic. It's beyond. Did we make the right decision? Was the correct decision made? Absolutely, absolutely. In a second, that was probably the best decision, is put the experts where they can be experts.
And we don't have the command center up here because we were trying to manage the size, and that they were certainly an integral part in reroutes and flow control and all the things that command center does. But maybe, Terry, you can speak a bit to some of the initiatives that were put into place, immediately following and throughout.
Again, so as you would imagine with any catastrophic event, communication is key. At your level, Terry's level, the administrator's level, the secretary's level. We had two-a-day telcons just to try to do recaps in regards to what does tomorrow hold for us, and that's where we're starting to get the numbers and see them continue to elevate, which was just simply amazing. But I will say the command center, as evidenced by the briefing that took place earlier on weather, that they managed it almost like a severe weather event for a long-term marathon. I mean, they were in there, they were engaged, making sure that stakeholders were involved. The command center as well as others were constantly engaged with the user community. So a lot of restrictions were put in place, but I think one of the key moves that the team made, in addition to the 15,000, was to take the overflights, take the transcons, take them around Chicago Center. Well, the first couple of days when they took the transcons around Chicago Center so that you can let Chicago O'Hare run unimpeded up and down, but there was weather to the south. So you look at Houston, Fort Worth, Memphis, those facilities. Again, when you try to quantify how many people touched this event, it was across the country. So Command Center played a key role, but also trying to manage that flow of traffic through a weather event that was south of Chicago airspace. But again, the key move being one of them, being taking all the overflights around, and letting O'Hare just run in and out so that the facilities that were taking that airspace were able to move Chicago to get them, to that number one level in 4 days.
We're going to open it up real quick for questions. If we have anybody in the audience. Nobody has a question?
The one back on the right.
Late in the day.
I think we do have one right there.
Russell Davis, Region X. I work with second level engineering. The thing that helped save
this thing was the ability to fall back to things like RCL and Bandwidth Manager and reconfigure communications on the fly. With a leased telco system like we're moving towards trying to get to 100%, some of those flexibilities may not be there under the current architecture. Is there any thought to keeping some ownership of facilities in-house?
You're going to have to take that one,
Yeah,
too.
and Russ, that is a great question. I will say, before I can go to that question, we're not represented by Tech Ops up here, right? Or second level engineering, the POFMs. Again, when you look at how this all took place, again, more people behind the scenes, trying to take care of that automation piece. But that is something that I know that Vaughn and Jeff they're looking at. What can we do for resiliency for the future? And that is a part, because if we didn't have ERAM, would we have been able to pull this off as well as from a software platform perspective? So I know that Jeff and Vaughn are taking a look at what those options are. We're looking for the gaps.
So if I could just take a moment to tell a little story, because we got 1,000 good stories, but I do have one about second level that I'd like to share with you. When they restored the system, they had to replace all of FTI, but everything else in that room, and it's the room's about the size of a football field, needed to be cleaned, and it was quite an extensive job. So some of the other equipment was damaged, they just didn't know it. About 5 days, maybe 6 days before they brought it back up, they turned on the FDIO system, which they thought was operational, and it basically blew up. I mean, it was not even close to it. So they called second level out in Atlantic City. And just an indication of the extraordinary job people outside, the immediate area did. They actually scavenged together an FDIO system in about a day. And then they called FedEx and asked them to ship it next day. Problem was, it wasn't going to be at the facility until 3 o'clock the next afternoon. So they loaded it up in a truck with 6 engineers and brought it out to the center and had it installed and running at 10 o'clock the next morning. That is the kind of contribution that we saw for 2 weeks. No one ever said no. And that's really what got us through. So I just wanted to share that with you and say thank you to your folks as well.
It's good. We had
Right here in the middle.
one in the middle and one on the right.
I was just wondering, how does this affect the talks about consolidating facilities? If you didn't have a Rockford, South Bend, Milwaukee, because everything was brought into one facility, what would be the outcome?
So we've actually got some collaborative work groups that are looking at, when we look at the gaps of where we were and where we think we're going to be tomorrow. We obviously have our Section 804 work, but I will say that one of the things that the team is looking at is what does our future look like? When we look at what is it going to take to bring back some of those facilities, from the approach control perspective. So we lost Chicago Center. What happens if we lose C90 for real? Those types of contingencies. So, those are things that we have teams that are established right now to take a look and see what can we do. What should that landscape now look like in the future?
Any other questions? There we go.
Got one on
Don
the right.
Schmeichel.
Don Schmeichel, Region X engineer on the safety committee. I work in that basement as part of my job at our 3 centers up in the Northwest Mountain region. And so, yeah, we look at a lot of that, the stuff in there, and we do our job to kind of make that as best as we can within the ability that we have when we're doing the installation. Question back to something that Bill said. I've been involved in a few restoration projects. There was a little one in Seattle about 14 years ago when we had an earthquake, and we put a tower back together similar to what you guys did. And every time we have an emergency, we roll up our sleeves and we figure out how to work together. How do we work in that direction so that our everyday job is doing that? And I think that's kind of what you mentioned, Bill, about collaboration and where we're going, but working together throughout the agency to do our job every day, not just in an emergency.
So I'm going to flip that around a little bit. I think one of the reasons why we were very successful within the facility is because we already sort of had a baseline for that. And a lot of it had to do with ERAM implementation. We had a very good ERAM team that involved tech ops and fast and all the elements in the facility, and they knew each other and they knew how to work together, and we relied on some of those very same people. We went out and found the ERAM POC and PFR and put them in charge of the team that was actually designing the restoration piece of it. So I think we had some of that. The other side of that is, the value of working together and how you carry that on to other projects. And I think we see it today. I hope we see it for a long time in the future. We send 180 controllers each day to other facilities. Those people were actually interacting with the people that were nothing more than a voice over the line for all those years. And now, they know each other. And I think we are going to see dividends that are, downstream here. From the fact that people know each other, they understand each other's operation a little bit better, they have maybe a little higher degree of respect. I think we're learning together as a learning organization to do that better, and I think this was one of the lessons.
I think just giving the smart people that we have working at the scopes, at the technicians, the engineers, people in headquarters, we all have ideas on how to do things, and I think we just need to figure out how we can work together on the same team better than we do every day. So
that's an excellent point, and I don't want to lose it, because if anybody is under the impression that we simply took the Chicago Center operation and replaced it in kind in other facilities, that's not at all what happened. To me, Toby talks about this being patriotic. I agree. I also think this is a good government story. We take a lot of heat as federal workers, and yet this event showed everything that we're not supposed to be. We were responsive, innovative, creative. We weren't burdened by excessive bureaucracy. We put new procedures in without going through all the SMS and everything else, and yet ensured safety every step of the way, because we unleashed people, the experts, to come up with solutions in real time and implement them, and that's what got us through this challenge.
Mitch, you have a question?
I don't have a question so much as a comment. When you watch something like this from afar on the television, you don't have any real appreciation for it. Until I saw that video earlier, I had no idea. I knew the number of facilities involved, but I just want to say, everybody that was involved in that operation, you guys are heroes, man. That was really a wow moment for me. That was amazing.
Well, that is a great segue for us to go on to the next phase, which is going to thank our panel here for their participation so far. We're going to recognize some people in the audience, and before we get into the recognition, I will tell you, just like we heard from this panel and we heard from people in the audience, there's absolutely no way to figure out the part and the role that every single person that helped get through this, where they were and what they did, and to recognize them appropriately. We are still uncovering facilities and lines of business and bargaining units that played a significant role as we pull all these pieces together and say, this is worthy of our thanks for as long as we can thank them. And how do we learn from what we went through in a crisis to apply it to everyday operations? So if somebody's left out of the gratitude, please don't take offense to that. Please just let us know, and we'll ensure that we tell the story about all the people that were a part of it and not just some of the people. So with that, help me thank the panel for their work here and their work during the crisis. Okay, we're going to bring, before I bring